Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and to share some experience out of the organization of FUEDI. FUEDI is the European Association of Loss Adjusting Associations. So it's not an individual membership, it's the membership, it's a European body of national associations, and NAIA, chaired by Andrei Bogachev, is representing Russia. And for this reason, he invited me to come here to speak. My role within FUEDI is being responsible in Central Eastern Europe and Eurasia. And in my daily life, I'm employed by Crawford as loss adjuster. And in my daily life, I'm also responsible for Central Eastern Europe and Eurasia. So in this combination, my daily life with the world, with your world, and the tasks from Europe are combined. What FUEDI, it was founded in 1968 by French and Italian and Dutch and others. And it's actually a federation for the loss adjusting experts. And here we already see what is loss adjusting expert. Because in the British market, we talk about loss adjusters, people who adjust a loss, who accept the liability of the policy. And in the German world, we talk about experts. And so we are trying to work out something which is not one, not the other. But we say, okay, loss adjusting experts is those people who are involved in handling the claim or assessing the claim or adjusting the claim. Especially the differences will have an impact in the processes and the client expectation and the market expectations. The objective is also to have, let's say, the services for, let's say, we call it the property casualty market and the engineering insurance market. Because there are other organizations like FEAA, which are the motor surveyors in Europe, and FERMA, which is the marine groups, there's three. You may know FERMA, which is the European Association of Risk Managers. So we are Insurance Europe, which is the European Association of Insurers, or BIPAR, which is the European Association of Brokers, Insurance Brokers. So we operate at that level, and we communicate with the European Union, European Commission about regulation as far as we can influence it. Around Europe, we represent about 10,000 people. The member associations, you see here the countries. Interestingly, of course, Russia's there with NAIA. I'm representing the Netherlands, and out of this is the Netherlands a little bit unique, and I will tell you about it because it's important for your CatNet discussion, because the majority are organizations or associations who register professionals. But in the Netherlands, we also professional the employers, the companies. So it's both a professional body and a trade organization. And as we have such a small country, and there's a lot of matters which are not insured, like flood, because half of our country is below sea level, we have made, as NIFRE, an agreement with the government that we are used in case of claims which are not insured, like earthquake, like heavy flood, or which are not insured, like crop losses or foot and mouth disease for cattle, livestock, which the government wants to present a claim to the European Union for solidarity funding. So suddenly we have two markets to serve. One is the market which is actually the insurance market, and the other market is that the government, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economics, the agriculture sections, accept our independent and impartial role in assessing losses of individuals and companies for financial tools. Our mission is therefore also to be independent and to be impartial. High standards and competences are required. FUEDI is pushing for that, code of ethics. The Dutch organization requires every adjuster to sign a declaration every year that you act in line with the code of conduct, that you are impartial, and that you adhere to the code of conduct. If you don't sign that declaration, you're written out of the register. In many cases, people want to be in the register, and The register will have a function when you're kicked out because you don't adhere to the regulation. And we need to cooperate as professional associations, and especially where you have CatNet, there's too much for everybody. So if you don't work with your colleagues in business, you only damage the market. And that means that we need open communication. We need transparency. Of course, we have competitors, which we don't like. That's why it's called competitor. But without a competitor, we cannot serve the market. So that's why they need to be our friends as well. And in this world, we communicate in the world with the broker and the insurer and the client. And some really need some assistance to understand how the product is served. That need of assistance requires that the loss adjuster needs some skills. He needs to be technical, he needs to have proper insurance knowledge, but he also needs practical skills. Yeah? He needs lateral thinking about this, thinking about that. He needs to deal with anger. People are very much there crying. Nobody's happy when they have a loss. People sometimes they shout because they have a loss, because so much frustrated. So we need to be able to deal with it. And sometimes also the loss adjuster has to deal with deaths. And and if you have every day, some people who are very much injured or drowned or whatever, that's also for the loss adjuster a difficult task. It's like the fire brigade and the policemen who are affected daily with tragedy. So we have to learn ourselves to protect ourselves from the misery of big disasters. So those are also soft skills which we need. The responsibility of the loss adjuster is this. It's a busy slide, good to read, good to show, but it is more like a project manager. We're talking about the building damage, we're talking about the machinery damage, we're talking about business interruption, we're talking about the opportunities for recovery of third parties. So it means that we have an open mindset, we have an open view. And then you see already the difference between loss adjusting and experts, because the expert for the building only wants to weigh so many cubic meters of concrete, and that's his job. And if there's a BI loss, so be it, but he doesn't require to calculate the BI because he only is a specialist in the building. But he also forgets that temporary repair of the building may benefit the BI. And the same happens with the machinery expert. He may be so in the tunnel vision that he forgets that temporary repair of the machine may give 60% output, which is good for 6 months production, and at least before we're waiting for the new machines to come. So there the project manager role is important, and all these decisions need to be in line with, let's say, with the business interruption. The forensic accountants are assisting us. So it's a mix. So the main questions are there. But the insurer says, what did happen? And sometimes that's not clear from the very beginning, because there are exclusions in play. So even the answer, there was a big bang, or there was a big fire. Nobody knows whether the machinery brown aspect is overruling the fire impact. So there could be different elements. So the answer to the questions is not sometimes easy, and people want to wait. I see, because I'm overlooking reporting of my colleagues in the Eastern Europe, they say the client is pressing, the broker is pressing for payment on account. Please pay 1 million for the first of a 20 million loss. But then we write the cause is still under investigation. So that is a difficult one if you already start to pay without knowing the cause. So those market pressures, and this will come back with catastrophes as well. And does it match the information with the risk surveys? We've seen it. We'll come back later in the catastrophe of being 7 months to New Zealand in Christchurch for earthquakes, and risk surveys were not in line with the underwriting information. And it means that also whether is the policy in play or not. Do you want to challenge when you have 50,000 claims? Or you say, then go deal with it. Root cause. There's a different causation theory. If you go to the English market, it's the proximate causation. German market is more remote causation. And it means that you can have 1 deductible, 2 deductibles, or more deductibles, depending how you look at the claim. And it means that people talk different languages, don't understand each other because they approach the file from a different causation theory. And it means that the jurisdiction clause is very important because the cedent may have a different jurisdiction than the reinsurers. Many times I've been involved in cases where the reinsurance policy, let's say London market, and the local policy, maybe German law or whatever, just make it as this case. But it is difficult how to match if the policies are not in line. Very, very important. And then the reserve strategy. There's a reserve strategy, big losses, the market allows the loss adjuster to bring in let's say a more reliable amount by the end of the month, 3-4 weeks time. We come up with something which is realistic. May not be that case after 3-4 weeks, but at least we are being pushed to that. And then, of course, are these losses also covered for the reinsurer? I'm also working for reinsurers as a supervising adjuster for the cedent. And sometimes I read a clause in the reinsurance contract, which is 1 page, and I look at the clause in the local language, which sometimes I cannot read. It's quite often that I cannot read, and I only see 6 sentences. So there's somewhere lost in translation, as one could say. And then you can challenge whether that policy, whether that clause is actually properly applicable. So we need to work with an open mind, and we need to deal with the matters. And of course, we need to look whether there are other policies in play. There may be mutual covers, like marine warehousing in comparison to the stock clauses of the property program. Local master policy. Many claims are covered on the local policy, but it may be that certain risks are not covered on the local policy, that the entire master policy is in play, especially for business intervention aspects. Something stupid and simple as storm can be difficult because people try to speak English, but they don't understand the consequences of speaking English. That means that here is an example which I was involved in, was a Spanish insurer. And you see all the countries have different ratings. Not one country, let's say Europe, has a unique, what is a storm cover. So if you have storm cover in one country and reinsured in the other, it could be completely different. And in this case, where I got involved with 10 million loss in Spain, there was actually a cover for temporal, but the lady who seek reinsurance in London had only one word for temporal, that was storm. So you see, she was looking for reinsurance for storm. And that meant that she was actually not buying reinsurance for both for 8, buying reinsurance for both for 10, because the English word for storm is both for 10. So suddenly you have a gap in your reinsurance model. Interesting to see, because a lot of insurers could abuse this with local insurance and master policies. But nobody cares, but nobody understands the differences between storm, because everybody has a different interpretation about storm. The catastrophes I want to discuss, because these are the normal day-to-day things, and then we move to catastrophes, and then the hurricanes. The oil well blowout of the Gulf of Mexico, 1 billion penalty, a lot of money to share about the claimants. But like the hurricanes, but there's also recently, we have 2,300 people missing in Bahamas. And of course, where's the policy? My house is gone. So that means that all these claims need to be approached from a different angle. Fukushima, Japan, interesting with the tsunami, nuclear. Some companies had some nuclear cover in the chain for the production chains, logistic chain. But even there, of course, does a loss adjuster go to a nuclear site? So he got special gauges to measure that he didn't get too much, let's say, radiation. And the funny thing is that the biggest load of radiation which he got was while he was flying back over the North Pole, and then it goes down again. The flooding of Bangkok, I will come later on. Earthquake in New Zealand, I will come in more detail. And we have the bushfires in Portugal. There again, where you have more bushfires, more misery, people are looking for insurance covers. I'm finding solutions, and the mudslide and the Catnat in France, which is interesting, because every policy has a cover for a NatCat. The catastrophe naturelle, and the regional court will decide whether Catnat conditions are applicable, and the normal loss adjusting process is in play, and every insurer pays through their normal system. So that is a very well organized environment. The hurricane flood, this is the Katrina loss. Interestingly, flood or storm, Ronald already mentioned, the causation, is it flood or is it storm? You can see here that some levees failed, so the wind pushed the water towards, the dikes and the levees, and they failed, and then it was a flood. So there's a clear difference between flood and storm, and as flood could be bought separately in the market, the insurers have finally decided that there's a storm cover and a flood cover. But you can imagine that the people who are living here, there's a misery, and you want your house to be paid, or you want to keep on living. And this has an impact in the social impact, the domestic issues. People are leaving and crying and don't go to work. So ultimately, where there is insurance for contingency BI of suppliers' risk to the oil industry and so on, you don't have your carpenter anymore, you don't have your electrician anymore, because you don't have your programmer anymore, because these are the people who live here. They don't show up anymore at your work, and they move to another state. So you always have a kind of a disaster on one side, but an enormous economical influence and repair. The carpenter who lives in one of those streets, he will not show up to repair the damage at your insured in a catastrophe model. So you have an economical consequence throughout the region. The flooding in Bangkok, which is also here clear, it's not easy to fly in loss adjusters when the airport is underwater. So that means that the reaction time is also delayed, not only for the loss adjusters, also for the Red Cross and all the others who want to provide assistance. But if you look here at the enormous wide area, we have been dealing with water damage to 20,000 companies. A lot of them were suppliers to the west or to the east, so a lot of interdependency losses in the BI. But here a new aspect came around through the English interpretation. It was the wide area damage aspect. Because if you're based here and the building is not damaged, but you don't have clients, do you have BI? You cannot sell. So if your building is damaged by water and it is repaired, but as a result the entire area is still underwater, you still cannot trade. So there was that aspect, whether in the wide area you're not able to trade, do you have then a covered business interruption? So there's an interesting aspect which needs to have an answer, of course, and the same happens with the hotels, not only here but also in the Caribbean, where not one tourist wants to go to the misery of an island. So the hotel is repaired, but there are no tourists. So is that the BI as a result of the storm, or is that a BI resulting from loss of attraction? So these are different aspects which come around when catastrophes are more considered. Earthquake under 72 hours. I got my call like every loss adjuster, the call of the boss. I have something for you. So I was called in the evening. Can you go for a few months to New Zealand? That was the only question and the only answer he wanted to hear, yes. So I only had to tell to my wife, why did you say yes? And I said, I'm just leaving for a few months. So that's the social part of being a loss adjuster. Interesting here is there was the first earthquake, was the 4th of September, 2010. Till now, there are 20,000 quakes and aftershocks. It's happening every day. So we were there, while I was there, there are no hotels because they're gone. Where does a loss adjuster stay? So we were in houses where people didn't want to live anymore, that were our beds, and then we have to stay there. And then I was in an apartment building. I was knocked out in midnight during a heavy shock out of my bed. And that building was on our list for 1 million on damage, but we were sleeping in it and other people were also sleeping in it. But the interesting aspect here is, you see, September 4th, 2010, 20,000 quakes till now. And February 22, 2011, 16. There's about 5,000 in between. And there were, the first day, oops, the screen is gone. But the first day there were 900 shocks. The next day was 600 shocks. There was 500 shocks. So 72-hour clause. After 1 month you have consumed the entire sum insured, because every time you have 100,000 deductible, and after 72 hours it still continues with another 100,000 and another 100,000 and another. So at the end of the month there is no insurance anymore. So insurers had to decide whether we are going to apply the 72-hour clause. And ultimately the insurers and the reinsurers agreed that they used 4th of September loss number 1 and February loss number 2, a date of loss. So that's certainly not 72 hours, there's a few months in between and 5,000 quakes. But the consequences was that the reserves of the reports of the September loss were, in the first time it was only 1 million, after 1 month it was 5 million, another month it's 10 million. So the reserves were only increasing because of the continuation of the quakes. And this meant, of course, an enormous discussion on the market, because over this period, because this period, and the same accounts for the other periods, people had in their policies automatic renewals. So the first loss they were underinsured, and the second loss they were insured for the same amount, but they were possibly now overinsured because the loss was so big on the first policy year, and the second year they were overinsured. And you had these kind of issues, and in addition to that, the loss adjusters were facing with questions of the reinsurance market, because the reinsurance renewal was based on calendar year and was not following the policy year. So you had in one policy, you could have 2 different reinsurance years with different leaders, with different questions, with different interpretations. And those questions were presented to the loss adjusters, or let's say for the senior complex ones, please sort out this mess. How should we interpret this? In addition, we were looking into payment on accounts. So we're looking into the files of the local loss adjusters. And they said, yes, pay 100,000, yes, pay 100,000, no problem. And then we say, where did you confirm this? Was there an email or was there a report? No, it's only a telephone call and my note. So at a certain moment, we could not review all the 10 reports because the consistency and the chaos was, let's say, not in line with market standards. And on the same side, we discussed the situation with insurers. And they said, yeah, we're working here with 6 people. We have work for 100. And we just pay, and sometimes we make a mistake. Payments are recorded on the wrong policy, but everybody works out. So it was also on that side chaos. And that means that when a catastrophe is there, you don't need to judge whether a catastrophe is in place, because it means chaos at the side of the insured, chaos at the side of the broker, chaos at the side of the insurer, claims department, reinsurers are questioning 1,000 times, and where do we get suddenly 500 loss adjusters? Because everybody's normally busy in his day-to-day task. So there's a kind of chaotic approach which needs to be managed. The system is down. Oh, here it is. This was earthquake Italy, also interesting. Not insured, but there the civil defense of Italy requested the national loss adjusting associations, so members of WADI, to combine their forces to assist the Ministry of Interior Affairs for assessing the damage. So there again you have a kind of coordination or cooperation between the insurance market, the insurance profession, the independence approach, and the misery which a government needs to manage. This is CatNat in France. This is recently, this is the 25th of May this year, or last year. You will see that there's, here it is mentioned, 8,000 calls about water damage, and 7,000 fire brigade people were involved. And that comes to the département, this is the province, the L'Eure, and the judge of the province, the chairman of the province, can declare CatNat. And that is how it operates, because if the judge declares CatNat, then the CatNat cover automatically kicks in. So it's a regional acceptance of a status, of a CatNat status. So how do we manage search? Because on one side we're driving down the loss adjusting cost, the claims cost, the service cost, the loss adjusters, cheaper, kick everybody out of the profession lean and mean, but suddenly when we need 1,000 or 100 or 500 people, where do they come from? And we want the most experienced and we want the best. But they're all busy. So we need a demand for new technology, but also we need a new need for interpretation of losses. And this is partly done by drones. So if you are using drones flying over certain disaster areas, from an insurer's point of view, you already know that at least 50% of the sum insured can be paid because it's full disaster area. So that let's say it incentivizes payment processes, and you can speed up, but ultimately you need to assess individual losses. There's also a principle with iPhones, but then you still have to rely on the mobile network system, that everybody takes pictures of the misery around, and that all that information is coming to you. But you have 20,000 losses with 20 pictures of one picture, 1 megabyte, you have 400,000 megabytes coming in. So how do you store that? So these are, new concepts, new ideas, but there are technical consequences. Data sharing in advance. We know from our mother company Crawford in the US, we get 1 day before the hurricane hits, we get the full data of the policies for the countries, because the broker will not be there because his house is gone as well, his business building is gone. So the insureds will not have a policy to prove. So you need, from a loss adjusting perspective, you need data and evidence. This house is insured by this insurer, and this is the person who's living there. And then you have, let's say, the third-party administration aspect, where you say the claims department is overwhelmed. We can do two things. We can ask the adjusters, we outsource to the adjusters, can you deal with all the claims administration as well? Or we want loss adjusters to assist at the claims department to work with us together to move the process. I will move very fast. So to manage, you have to accept a certain range. You need to accept policy review. We have to do it more simple. You have to, let's say, high volumes. Let's say up to 5 million ruble. We only need one-page report. We don't need invoices. We only want to see good pictures. But that is completely contrary to the Russian model, which is no invoice, no money. So you have to find something new if you want to manage catastrophes. And you have to allocate your resources. If you have simple losses, do it by drones, and use the few people which are still around to make complex and field loss adjusters for, let's say, for the high-end losses. So CatNat management, accept CAT status. It doesn't last 1 week. We see on SCORE that payment will take a while, but also for the loss adjusters who are still, after 2 years and 3 years, still on the same files. So where do we get the capacity of the loss adjuster for 2-3 years? Claims controls, consistency, clause interpretation. because we are there for 6 weeks, then my colleague takes over, does he reads the policy in the same way, then another colleague comes over, so you have consistency in clauses, interpretation. Dispute management, your catch pricing, because normally plywood is, let's say, 1,000 ruble, and now because there's a cat is 10,000 ruble, are we paying 10,000 ruble, are we paying 1,000? A quick release of money, if you don't pay quick, you cannot allow for repairs. And not important, mobilization, demobilization, because we need to stay in hotels, we need to have offices, we need to have IT. We are exposed to GDPR, we cannot take data out of the country. So suddenly we have to create a complete base camp with managed services. And it means that if you start moving into, this is the last page, this is the last slide, if you move to catastrophe management, I think it's important to have a loss adjusting, a harmonized loss adjusting capacity in Russia. And you may judge whether that should be a recognition of the loss adjuster or registration or regulation in it. But these are demands, and you want to organize it, in my opinion, properly. Thank you very much.